Hey guys, tonight we're going to slip quietly into the shadows of ancient Egypt. Not into the grandeur of pyramids or the clatter of chariots, but into something far softer, more intimate, and let's be honest, a whole lot more relaxing: the world of Egyptian hairdressers. You're crouching in the shade of a papyrus grove, the Nile murmuring in the distance as a reed mat door creaks open. Inside, a heady scent of oils and incense envelops you, and dozens of mirrors, bronze, not glass, catch flickers of lamplight. You've stepped into one of the busiest social centers of the ancient world, the neighborhood salon. Except in this case, the salon is a tiny open-air courtyard flanked by limestone benches and a cracked clay shelf lined with jars. One contains lotus oil, another possibly something less appealing. You're not quite sure, and the labels in hieroglyphs, but trust the woman standing behind you, gently parting your hair with a comb made of polished bone. Her fingers are cool, deft, practiced. She's more than a hairdresser. She's part healer, part confidant, part magician. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere across the world, let me know your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You settle onto a low stool, knees bent awkwardly, and the woman, her name is Tia, offers you a smooth black stone. It's warm from the sun, and she uses it to gently flatten your hair. To calm the scalp, she murmurs, though you're not convinced this isn't just ancient Egyptian for stop fidgeting. Tia speaks with a kind of reverence for hair. In this world, hair isn't just style, it's social currency, religious signal, and a direct line to health and the gods. You learn quickly that you've entered a realm where beauty is sacred, and science and superstition are inseparable. In her corner hut, a young assistant grinds herbs into paste. The rhythmic scrape of pestle against granite bowl is hypnotic. Lemongrass, fenugreek bits of dried myrrh. It smells divine. Tia waves her hand over your head like a priestess reading omens. You eat too many figs, she says suddenly, hair dry. See? She pinches a strand, holds it up like it's a damaged scroll from the Library of Alexandria. This isn't just judgment, it's diagnosis. And there's more. Hanging near the shelf are a dozen amulets, tiny intricately carved charms shaped like cats' anks and even combs. One is supposed to prevent hair from falling out. Another, she claims, keeps scorpions away while you sleep. You choose not to ask how those two issues are related. Still, she explains that some clients, mostly wealthy women, and a few priests, come not just for a trim, but for something deeper. A late-night cleanse, a whispered chant, a consultation under starlight. Haircuts are often timed with lunar cycles. Why historians still argue whether this had to do with religious rituals, agricultural calendars, or just the convenience of cooler evening weather. The tools on her tray are deceptively simple. A copper blade sharpened to perfection, bone combs in various widths, tweezers, yes, tweezers fashioned from wood and ivory, and a curiously forked stick, which she tells you is a lice picker. Don't worry, she's just showing it to you for fun. Probably. Modern Egyptologists have found entire hairdressing kits buried alongside the dead. Some include jars of scented oils, others have bronze razors, and in one tomb archaeologists uncovered what looks like a portable wig stand. And no, you're not imagining it. One jar did indeed contain residue from crocodile fat. Apparently, someone thought it made a fabulous conditioner. The day winds on. Tia's salon sees a parade of clients, an elderly woman whose head is completely shaved, but still wants oil for the shine. A young man in linen robes nervously asking for something that makes me look braver, and a little girl whose mother wants her curls twisted into a protective spell. Yes, you heard that right. Some braids are tied with strands of flax soaked in prayers. Don't snort. It's probably more effective than most modern hair serums. You glance at yourself in a tiny mirror, its bronze surface slightly warped. Your scalp tingles. Your shoulders have dropped half an inch from where they were. The air is warm and slow. Somewhere in the distance, someone's flute plays 3 sleepy notes, then fades. You don't know what Tia smeared into your scalp, but it smells like heaven and feels like a small, silent blessing. And just when you think the session is over, she pulls out a jar of honey-colored goo and starts massaging it into your temples. For dreams, she says simply. You ask if she means it'll help you sleep better. She shakes her head. No, it'll make your dreams prettier. Historians still debate what these late-night treatments were for beauty divination, dating prep, or just ancient aromatherapy. You don't care. You close your eyes, and for a moment, forget entirely that this is supposed to be educational. It just feels nice. The next morning, you wake up with the faint scent of lotus still clinging to your scalp and a subtle sheen that probably wasn't there before. Your head feels lighter somehow. As the sun spills across the Nile, your feet take you toward another courtyard. This one quieter, a little more refined. You've been invited to witness a ritual as old as Egyptian civilization itself, the art of wig making. You wouldn't think hair could be this serious, but oh, in Egypt it is. Wigs aren't just fashion. They are status, spirituality, and survival, all coiled together into one braided masterpiece. And in a world where the sun is relentless, lice are determined, and water is precious, real hair was often too risky to keep. So, you visit the artisans who specialize in the next best thing, or depending on how you look at it, something better. You duck into a shaded workshop where bundles of black-brown and the occasional auburn human hair hang like herbs drying from the rafters. Some are real, harvested carefully from the living or the dead. Others are plant fibers dyed and softened with castor oil until they're nearly indistinguishable from the real thing. You eye one such wig that's as glossy as a raven's wing. And if you're being honest, fancier than anything you've ever worn. The wig maker, a wiry man named Beck, holds up 2 contrasting pieces, one short and severe, the other voluminous and dramatic. For mourning, he says of the shorter style. For weddings, he says of the larger. Then he chuckles and adds, or depending how much your in-laws like you. His assistant rolls her eyes. Egyptian wigs weren't random. Each was coded with social meaning. A shoulder-length wig on a woman might mean she was married. A boy with a shaved head and one long side lock wasn't just a trendsetter. He was declaring his youth, his parentage, even his religious role. Priests were often completely bald beneath ceremonial wigs, the act of shaving itself part of a purification process. And if you were rich, well, your wig might be adorned with gold wire beads of lapis lazuli or perfumed cones of fat that slowly melted down over your synthetic curls during a banquet. The effect was glamorous, sure, but also a little sticky. Imagine someone pouring scented candle wax down your back and calling it divine presence. That's ancient Egyptian elegance for you. Beck gestures for you to sit. He wants to show you how a wig cap is formed. First, he weaves papyrus fibers into a lattice soft enough to sit against the scalp, but firm enough to hold the weight. Then he methodically knots each strand of hair in place, working row by row like a human loom. You notice his fingertips are slightly scorched. He uses a warm blade to seal the ends, and once he admits he dropped hot resin into his lap and didn't walk properly for a week. While he works, he tells you something strange. Some people commissioned wigs, not for themselves, but for the afterlife. You frown. What ghosts get bad hair days too? Beck just shrugs. What if Osiris sees you first from behind? It's a good point. Egyptologists have indeed uncovered burial wigs still perfectly intact, preserved by dry air and devotion. Some even had labels stitched into them. For Nefru, High Priestess of Hathor, just in case there was confusion in the next world. Historians still argue whether the dead wore their wigs into the tomb or were adorned afterward by the embalmers. Either way, looking presentable for eternity was non-negotiable. But wigs weren't only about appearances. In many cases, they were deeply symbolic. The goddess Hathor was often depicted with a thick mane of curled hair, and worshippers, especially women, might wear similar styles when invoking her blessing. Wearing the wrong hair could, according to some temple inscriptions, disrupt rituals or even offend the gods. You wonder if they ever had bad hair days up there on Mount Olympus. Wrong mythos, you remind yourself. There's a knock at the courtyard door. A noblewoman enters, flanked by two attendants. Her head is completely shaved, shining like polished marble, and yet she radiates power. You quickly realize she's not here for a new style. She's here for a blessing. Beck removes a thin, shimmering wig from a carved box and places it gently onto her scalp. Then, with slow ceremony, he brushes it 3 times with a sacred comb, first toward the heart, then toward the heavens, and finally back over the shoulders. Each stroke is meant to align the body-soul and Ka, the Egyptian life force. You can't help but feel the hairs on your arms rise as she closes her eyes and breathes deeply, as if the wig is more than adornment, it's armor. There's silence for a long moment. Then she smiles, thanks Beck in a whisper, and leaves. The room feels different now, more serious. You glance again at the line of wigs, each one waiting for a head, a ritual, a destiny. And you realize that in ancient Egypt, beauty wasn't just vanity, it was identity. It was memory. It was preparation for what came after. Beck hands you a simple braid on a leather cord. A charm, he says, for when your thoughts won't settle. You nod, tucking it into your pouch, and step back into the hot sun, wondering what your own hair might say about you if it had a voice or a past life. The afternoon heat clings to your skin as you wander through a market alley smelling of roasting onions and dust. You duck beneath a flapping linen awning and step into another salon, though this one feels less like a workshop and more like a perfume shop collided with a gossip parlor. Brass bowls glint in the light, shelves bow under the weight of tiny alabaster jars, and in the air, a scent you can't quite place. Part myrrh, part something, floral part, date, syrup. You're not here for a haircut today. You're here to learn about something even more mysterious. Egyptian scalp scents, a ritual so indulgent, it makes your fancy modern shampoo look like swamp water. A young man named Mena greets you with an exaggerated bow. He's dressed in a flowing robe stained with oil spots and has a grin like he's about to sell you something you'll absolutely regret and somehow love anyway. You want to smell like love power or mystery, he asks. You blink. Is all three an option? He ushers you to a low bench where a client sits, eyes closed, her head cradled in Mena's lap as he massages a thick balm into her scalp. The blend is heated slightly over a clay lamp, just warm enough to melt the oils. You lean closer and catch hints of blue lotus cinnamon bark and something sharp, like citrus rind dried in the sun. The scent hits you like a lullaby and a lightning bolt at the same time. In Egypt, Mena explains smelling good isn't just for date nights or royal appearances. It's a social contract. The elite were expected to smell like divinity, clean, sweet, and prepared for eternity. In fact, ancient texts sometimes describe a stench of wrongdoing, implying that to smell bad was a moral failure. Let that sink in. Not showering sinful, but what you're watching isn't just a fancy massage. It's a status performance. The woman being perfumed wears a linen gown embroidered with tiny fish symbol of rebirth. She's clearly high-ranking. And as the oil is worked into her scalp, an attendant places a cone of scented fat atop her head. Slowly, across the evening, that cone will melt, releasing fragrance like a built-in humidifier. Yes, it's absurd. Yes, it's also a little genius. Historians still argue whether those cones were literal or symbolic. Some tomb paintings show them melting realistically down wigs. Others suggest they were artistic shorthand for "this person smells amazing." But archaeological digs have uncovered cone-shaped residues, possibly of animal fat or beeswax, laced with perfume ingredients. So maybe it was both real and metaphor. You watch Mena mix his oils in tiny dishes, each one marked with a hieroglyph. He says the blue lotus blend induces calm. Another one rich in cardamom and honey makes you seem more trustworthy. You raise a skeptical eyebrow, but he only shrugs. It's in the scrolls, he says. Papyrus doesn't lie. Indeed, records show that perfumes were often prescribed by healers as well as beauticians. A smelly scalp wasn't just embarrassing. It could signal spiritual imbalance or attract demons. And don't forget, your head was considered a sacred space, housing both thought and spirit. If it smelled off, something inside might be off too. At the back of the salon, a wooden cabinet displays rows of tiny flasks. Some are shaped like cats. Others look like birds. One particularly odd vessel resembles a crocodile mouth open holding. You guessed it, crocodile fat-based scent for men who wanted to seem ferocious. You snort. Mena tells you about the kupsesh, a scented headcloth worn by dancers and temple musicians. When wet, it cooled the scalp and released fragrance slowly. a kind of ancient aromatherapy headband. He dips one in rose water and ties it gently around your own forehead. It's damp, cooling, and smells like a garden at sunrise. You suddenly understand why Egyptian priests were forbidden from wearing wool, but required to wear perfume. Sensory cleanliness was sacred. And then comes the gossip. The other hairdressers drift in and out of the conversation, telling stories about clients. Lady Neferu changed her scalp scent 3 times this week, one whispers, trying to get back at her husband. Another says, "Did you hear the young scribe use the priestess blend before his exam?" Cue laughter. Scent, you realize, is more than style, it's code. Political, romantic, even spiritual. The most luxurious oils were imported: frankincense from Punt cedarwood, from Lebanon cinnamon, possibly from India. These weren't just luxuries, they were commodities traded like gold, and not everyone could afford them. So some commoners made do with crushed dates, river clay, and whatever herbs they could grow. One particularly bold recipe combined beer residue and mint. Mena wrinkles his nose at the memory. Only good for warding off goats, he says. Before you leave, he offers you a tiny sample. It's a reddish balm stored in a hollow fig shell. He calls it scent of the horizon. He insists it was popular among tomb painters. You dab a little behind your ear, and for a moment, you understand why earthy sweet and just a little bitter. Like memory, as the sun sets and the air begins to cool, Mena lights a bundle of scented reeds and waves it gently toward your face. To balance your inner winds, he says with a wink. Sure. Why not? You step outside, your head slightly oily, your nose tingling, and your mood, well, unexpectedly good. You smell like mystery. You smell like status. You smell like someone who could totally walk into a pharaoh's party and be mistaken for a minor god. The next morning, you're led to a sunlit courtyard on the edge of the military quarter. This is not a beauty salon. It's not even a barber shop in the traditional sense. It's a training ground. And today, your guide, a wiry teenager with arms like chisels and a braid swinging down the right side of his head, is about to show you that in ancient Egypt, hair could mean war. He's called Kamwaset, but everyone just says Ka. He belongs to a youth division attached to the army and his braid. That's not just decoration. It's a declaration. That sidelock oiled wrapped and sometimes stiffened with wax is more than a fashion statement. It announces that he's a warrior in training, a defender of the state, and maybe one day a general or a martyr. He lets you touch it. Its stiff, heavy smells, faintly of resin and charcoal. If it's not itchy, it's not tight enough, he jokes. Across the yard, dozens of other youths go through drills barefoot in the sand linen skirts, flying side braids bouncing like metronomes. Each braid is slightly different, thicker, shorter, adorned with copper rings or simple cloth cords. Ka explains that while the basic side lock shows status as a military youth, the accessories tell a subtler story. Some wear gold if they come from nobility. Some wrap red-dyed leather as a warning. These boys fight first, talk later. You glance at your own head. No braid, no symbol. Just a foreign scalp, sweating under the sun. Ka grins and shrugs. You'd be a scribe, he says. No offense, but it wasn't just boys. Some reliefs show women with side locks, usually priestesses or temple dancers dedicated to certain deities. And in times of war, Female warriors occasionally adopted male-coded hairstyles as a form of disguise or intimidation. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or just ceremonial. But the art doesn't lie. There were women in armor, hair braided like snakes, charging into battle with the same fierce grace. The side lock of youth, also called the Horus lock, was often tied with a thread that corresponded to the god Horus himself. It wasn't just about showing age or rank. It was about channeling divine strength, wearing bravery like an accessory, and cutting that lock. That wasn't a simple haircut. That was a rite of passage, a ceremonial snip marking the moment a child stepped into adulthood or a recruit became a warrior. Ka gestures to a small stone platform in the corner of the courtyard. It's stained, slightly scorched, and surrounded by what looks like old feathers. That's where we cut the braid, he says. When the time comes, you swallow. It's not dramatic, it's personal. You're watching boys become men with just a single slice of a blade, but the braid wasn't only cut at coming of age. Sometimes it was burned in tribute. If a soldier died in battle, his braid might be severed and offered to the gods with incense. It was said to carry the essence of his courage. You think of Ka's fierce expression and wonder how many braids that platform has seen and how many it's mourned. There's a fringe, but oddly compelling, that some generals ordered their men to wear braids that stuck out deliberately, even absurdly during battle. Why? Because if the enemy aimed for the braid, they missed the head. Strategic misdirection, ancient style. Whether that's genius or nonsense is still up for debate, but it does sound like something a clever commander might try. Ka walks you to a shaded bench and offers a cold drink, fermented barley water, earthy and sharp. To steady your nerves, he says. Then from a leather pouch, he pulls a thin cord and begins braiding a lock of your own hair. It's awkward. You wince as he tugs, but the sensation is grounding. He ties it off with a tiny reed ring. Now you have a symbol, he says matter-of-factly. It's small. Probably ridiculous looking. But still, you feel it. That tug behind your right ear. A thread connecting you to a system older than empires. You're not a warrior. You'll never be a general. But today, you've been given a little piece of courage. And maybe, just maybe, you'll carry it with you. The drills resume. Dust kicks into the air. Boys yell in unison. Blades glint under the sun. Their braids sway with every motion like pendulums keeping sacred time. You sit quietly, the sounds of training fading into the heat. Shimmer the weight of history pressed gently against the side of your scalp. You return to the salon in the late afternoon, still feeling the tug of Ka's warrior braid behind your ear. The gentle clink of bronze tools and the scent of something toasted greet you this time, not incense, but a thick, nutty aroma. Tia, your original hairdresser, waves you in. You're just in time, she says, her fingers already working a paste into a client's scalp. We're doing the baldness blend today. You blink. Baldness. You look at the client, a young priest in his 20s, head bowed under her hands. He doesn't seem bald at all. But Tia leans in and whispers, it's preventative. And also, he's convinced it makes his dreams clearer. She nods to a small tray beside her. It holds a tiny spoon, a flat ceramic palette, and 2 jars, one filled with thick castor oil, the other with something pale and grayish. You don't want to ask, but of course she offers it anyway. Crocodile fat, she says far too cheerfully. Rendered with fenugreek and burnt palm leaves. You hesitate. and people actually put that on their heads. Tia just grins. You probably wouldn't survive ancient Egypt. You settle in and watch as the mixture is heated gently over a flame, then stirred until it turns silky. With the confidence of someone who's done this 1,000 times, Tia dips her fingers into the warm blend and begins rubbing it into the priest's scalp. He sighs loudly. It clearly feels amazing. Castor oil, she explains, is a staple. Thick, shiny, full of something she calls sun memory. Egyptians believed it could not only stimulate hair growth, but also ward off scalp demons. You pause. Sorry, scalp demons. Oh yes, she says, nodding solemnly. They crawl into your ears when you sleep and whisper reasons why your hair should fall out. You're unsure if she's serious. You let it slide. Historians do confirm that Egyptians used castor oil for a wide range of purposes as lamp fuel laxative and hair tonic. In fact, the earliest mention of it dates back over 4,000 years. There's even speculation that Cleopatra herself used it as part of her beauty routine and crocodile fat. Well-fringed theories abound. Some texts refer to it as being cooling and powerful, though others suggest it was more for show, like buying the most expensive shampoo just to feel superior. The most curious thing is how these treatments were applied. Always with touch, always with ritual. You don't just slap it on. You start at the temples, spiral inward, then press down 3 times at the crown. The 3 suns. Tia calls it representing dawn, noon, and dusk. She says it balances your ka. You're still not entirely sure what that is, but it sounds important. The priest hums a bit as she continues. He says he sees colors when I do this, Tia whispers. Last time, it was green. Very auspicious. The fringe of the salon fills with regulars, older women with wrapped heads, teenagers with new braids, and a farmer who clearly wandered in by accident and now looks too polite to leave. There's a sense of quiet reverence here, even playfulness. You start to realize that hair care wasn't just a service. It was communion. One woman leans over and tells you about her cousin, who used to brew her own hair oil from donkey milk and figs. Her hair was like midnight, she brags, but she smelled like a bakery during monsoon. There's even a papyrus scroll on the shelf, curling at the edges, that contains what might be the earliest known hair diary. Tia translates a few lines. Day 3, scalp, sore from sun. Used lotus and bitter root. Slight improvement. Dreams unsettled. You wonder what it must have been like to live in a world where people track their hair the way modern folks track moods or astrology signs. A small child toddles in whining. Her mother sits her on a lap, and Tia gives the tiniest head massage you've ever seen. 2 fingers. Tiny circles. The girl's eyes roll back, like she's about to nap right there on the spot. Tia catches your gaze. Healing, she says, it starts here, and she taps your scalp gently. It's a funny thing. So much of history feels distant, cold, like etched stone or dusty scrolls. But here, someone is rubbing crocodile fat into a priest's head while gossiping about last week's dream visions. It's tender, silly, profound. Historians still debate whether these treatments had genuine medical value or were just ritual placebo. But the truth may lie somewhere in between. After all, if someone massages your head lovingly with warm oils while whispering that your dreams are holy and your hair is strong, you will feel better. As the sun begins to dip behind the low rooftops, You feel your own eyelids droop. You didn't even get a treatment today, but somehow, just watching was enough. You smell like castor and myrrh. Your scalp tingles with imagined sensation, and you quietly promise yourself, when you get home, whatever century that may be, you're definitely investing in some castor oil. You wake the next morning with a crick in your neck, probably from napping sideways against a basket of date leaves in the salon's corner. But somehow, your scalp still feels pampered. Tia's already at work sharpening a set of long bronze scissors against a flat stone, humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. She beckons you over. "We're cutting hair for luck today," she says. You glance at the client, an anxious-looking young woman, swathed in fresh linen, a small copper amulet dangling from her neck. Her fingers drum nervously on her lap. You assume this is just another trim, until Tia pulls out a small statue of Bess, the squat, lion-faced protector god of households, music, and childbirth. Definitely not your usual salon mascot. The girl murmurs that she's due to give birth in a few weeks, and this haircut, it's a form of protection. Not for beauty, not even for hygiene, but to ensure the gods will be pleased. The scissors pause in midair. Don't flinch. Tia warns, then grins. Hair remembers fear. You're not sure if she's joking. Probably. Mostly. In ancient Egypt, hair was believed to hold spiritual energy. Snipping it wasn't just a physical act. It was symbolic. You're letting go of something, starting fresh. Or if the stakes are high, you're trying to dodge the evil eye by changing your spiritual shape. Tia says it's like fooling a jealous ghost into passing you by. You're not the same person now. See, different haircut. Nearby, an older man steps into the courtyard. He's sunburnt, sullen with wild curls escaping from his head wrap. For the barley harvest, he grunts. Tia nods solemnly. She snips exactly 3 locks and buries them under a smooth stone beside a potted fig tree. 3 seeds of luck, she mutters. 1 for sun, 1 for soil, 1 for silence. You blink. That last part feels important. Snipping rituals varied depending on occasion. Births, weddings, new jobs, safe travel. Each had its own custom. Some cut a single strand and floated it down the Nile. Others burned it with scented resin, sending it up as an offering to whichever deity you hoped was listening that day. Historians still argue whether these were everyday acts or reserved for temple ceremonies, but clearly hair was never just hair. You're handed a jar to hold, inside a tangle of clipped locks tied with papyrus string. Offerings, Tia explains. People come back for them later, or they don't. You can't help but imagine someone years from now rifling through their past selves, wondering if they should burn this one or bury it under a full moon. But it's not just cutting hair that invites superstition. Cutting it at the wrong time. That's risky business. Tia recalls a story of a man who clipped his beard during the rising of Sirius, the star Egyptians called Sopdet, linked to the goddess Isis. That was a sacred moment tied to the Nile's flooding and the start of the agricultural year. By trimming his beard on that day, he supposedly offended the gods. Within a week, his ox died. His wife ran off with a papyrus merchant, and he developed a scalp rash that no one could explain. Coincidence maybe, but don't tempt the gods, especially not over hair. Some superstitions are more practical. Tia tells you that cutting your hair on a Tuesday invites arguments. On Thursdays, you'll dream vividly. On Sundays, never ever trim a child's hair unless you want to curse them with a wandering spirit. She says all this very casually while carving an intricate side braid into a little boy's scalp. It's Tuesday. You don't ask. There's one more layer to all this temple haircuts. You hear hushed stories of sacred barbers. Yes, that was a real job who only worked in temples. Their scissors were blessed. Their combs stored in protective amulets. Before festivals, high priests would undergo a full-body shave, including every strand of hair, to purify themselves before standing in front of the gods. The ritual was called removing the chaos, and honestly, it's got a great ring to it. You close your eyes and try to imagine it kneeling under the rising sun, feeling every follicle freed as the chaos of the world slides away with each gentle snip. There's something strangely comforting about it. You could use a ritual like that. Suddenly, you hear a loud hiss. A cat has leapt onto the offering jar, knocking it over. Clippings scatter. Tia curses very softly and mutters something about Bastet's moods. She gathers the locks carefully, sorts them with practiced fingers, and buries a few under another fig pot. That one's not coming back, she says more to herself than to you. Before you leave, she offers you the scissors. Cut a strand, she says, for change. You hesitate, then gently lift a small piece from behind your ear. Snip. It's oddly satisfying. She takes the strand, ties it with thread, and places it gently in your palm. Keep it or don't. But now the air knows you. You walk out into the sunset, your fingers tingling around that little knot of hair. Somewhere in your pocket, your scalp, or maybe your soul you've shifted. Just a little. Something is different now. You're back in the village square, but this time, the midday sun is brutal, baking the whitewashed walls, scorching the cobbled paths, and practically boiling the linen right off your shoulders. Even the cats have given up on dignity, sprawled belly up in the shade. You finally understand why, in ancient Egypt, head wraps weren't just fashion, they were survival gear. A pair of women sit near a well dipping strips of fine linen into a ceramic bowl of rose water and palm vinegar. They wring the cloth out, fold it into perfect triangles, and drape it around their heads like chefs preparing for battle. You get waved over. You'll faint if you don't wear one, says the older woman, already reaching for your hair. Her fingers are cool. Her tone is not negotiable. As the damp cloth settles around your scalp, you feel your core temperature drop by about 2 pharaohs. It's an instant ancient form of air conditioning. And stylish, too. Each wrap is dyed slightly, with henna giving it a soft blush orange tint and a faint earthy scent. Linen head wraps weren't just about staying cool. They were deeply symbolic. Depending on the region or occasion, they could signal your profession, your marital status, even your mood. A tightly coiled turban, possibly a tradesman, a loose double-layered veil. You might be in mourning or hiding from someone. Historians still argue whether these codes were consistent across regions or more like fashion dialects. But the art and artifacts show that no one wrapped their hair without intention. Henna itself adds another layer of complexity. You're ushered into a shaded hut where a bowl of henna paste, reddish brown and gritty, is being stirred slowly with a carved stick. The smell is pungent, sharp, slightly sweet, like dried herbs and rusted copper. This is for blessings, says the girl kneeling beside it. She has 2 dots of henna painted above her eyebrows, and her palms are covered in intricate swirls. And cooling. And for dreams. And to stop bad luck. And for parties. In other words, henna is the Egyptian duct tape of spirituality. She dips a fine brush made from palm fibers into the paste and begins painting your scalp. Yes, your scalp. The brush tickles. She draws circles, dots, delicate whorls, like seashells. This is the eye of Horus, she says, tapping a spot just above your ear. It watches the part of you that sleeps. Henna was used for centuries in Egypt for ceremonial adornment, especially on the body's most expressive parts. Hands, feet, scalp, and sometimes even fingernails. It was believed to carry protective magic, warding off evil and inviting good fortune. Pregnant women painted their bellies. Dancers decorated their souls. And those facing big transitions, marriage, travel, harvest season, often marked their skin and hairline with carefully chosen symbols. But applying henna to the scalp wasn't just spiritual, it was cooling. In a climate where sunstroke was a real danger, the evaporative power of henna paste offered temporary relief. Add to that the satisfying tingle and a rich, earthy scent, and you've got an all-natural remedy that doubles as a fashion statement. There's a fringe theory that temple scribes, those who worked long hours in the sun, copying spells, would paint protective glyphs onto their heads using henna. The idea being that when inspiration struck, or a spirit whispered through the reeds, the marked scalp would be more receptive. Whether that's divine conductivity or heat stroke is anyone's guess. Once your henna dries, it flakes into fine red powder. You're handed a stiff bristled brush and told to sweep it off toward the east. Always toward the sunrise, they say. So the bad spirits follow the light and leave you be. You comply, just in case. You catch your reflection in a polished copper dish. The designs are faint, almost ghost-like, but they shimmer slightly in the sun. You look like someone who knows secrets. And then come the head wrap variations, each one a minor masterpiece. There's the fishtail twist, the temple double fold, and the mysteriously named sunfighter. The older woman shows you how to bind a small stone, cooled in river water, inside the fabric for added chill. Keeps the thoughts from boiling, she says. One girl wraps an onion peel into her turban. For memory, she explains with a grin. You pause, glance at her seriously, then burst out laughing. She just shrugs. Maybe it works. It's not all serene and soothing, though. There's also fashion drama. Apparently, someone in the next village claimed to invent a new head wrap style called the papyrus spiral, and then got caught copying it from an older cousin. Outrage scandal. Head wrap gate, you nod solemnly as the tale unfolds, trying not to snort. Before you leave, the henna artist offers a final blessing. She places her palm on your crown, murmurs something in ancient Egyptian, and kisses her fingers. Now, your thoughts won't wander tonight, she says. They'll spiral inward like water. You step outside, wrapped, painted, and cooled from head to toe. The sun's still relentless, but your scalp is shaded. Your mind feels insulated, and your body hums with the quiet magic of ancient rituals. And if anyone asks why you smell like herbs and look like a wandering monk who wandered through an art studio, you'll just smile and say, it's for dreams, and for luck, and because I can. It's nighttime now. The moon hangs full and heavy, reflected in the slow-moving waters of a ceremonial basin as you step barefoot onto the cool stones of a temple courtyard. Tonight isn't about style or cooling off or flirting with henna. Tonight is for ritual And in this sacred space, every haircut is a prayer. You've been invited to observe a temple shearing. That's what they call it. You expected maybe quiet chanting, maybe a few candles. Instead, it's a full production. The courtyard is lit by oil lamps that flicker like stars. Incense curls in delicate coils, perfuming the air with frankincense myrrh and dried lotus petals. The scent clings to your skin. You already feel like you're stepping sideways out of time. The priest who greets you wears a clean, shaven head gleaming in the lamplight, and a robe so white it almost glows. He introduces himself as Iames, the temple's ritual barber. Yes, that was a real title. He doesn't cut hair because it's grown out. He cuts it when the moon is full, when the omens align, or when someone's soul needs a reset. He gestures to a young man kneeling at the center of the courtyard, his head bowed. A faint line of sweat runs down the side of his face. This is not a casual appointment. The shearing begins. Iames uses a blade of copper thin and crescent-shaped, like a moon held sideways in his hand. Each stroke is slow, deliberate. You notice that he's humming not a tune, but a rhythm maybe to keep time with the pulse of something bigger than both of you. The onlookers, temple scribes, and musicians watch in silence. You're told this haircut marks the boy's transition into temple service. He's offering his hair to Thoth, god of wisdom. Not metaphorically, literally. A small clay jar sits beside him. Each snipped strand is coiled carefully inside. Later, it will be sealed, anointed, and buried in the temple garden. There's a calm here that's almost otherworldly. No chatter, no nervous fidgeting. Just the sound of the blade whispering through hair, the crackle of incense, and the distant coo of a night heron somewhere beyond the temple walls. Historians still argue whether these rituals were widely practiced across Egypt or reserved for elite priesthoods. Some believe every temple had its own version. Others argue that haircutting in sacred spaces was more symbolic than frequent used for purification before rituals or to mark specific lunar alignments. The truth likely lives somewhere in the overlap of those ideas. Iames tells you that the direction of the cut matters. North to south invites clarity. East to west seals intention. Spiral cuts, saved for oracles or high initiates, are said to unbind the soul from earth. You glance at the boy. His haircut follows a spiral. You feel a shiver down your back. The blade is wiped clean, with a cloth soaked in wine and river water. Not for sanitation, though, that's a plus, but because the Nile, being sacred, is thought to carry away impurity when mixed with fermented grapes. The cloth is then burned. Nothing is left to chance. Later, another priest steps forward. He sprinkles barley grains over the boy's bare scalp and presses a small black stone obsidian, maybe into the center of his forehead. To seal the light, he says, "You're starting to lose track of what's symbolic and what's practical." But perhaps that's the point. In a place like this, under this moon, those lines blur until you don't care which is which. Behind you, a singer begins to chant. The language is ancient, the notes rising and falling like waves on a slow tide. Iames hands you a small jar. Inside is hair not yours, but someone else's, perfumed and tied with a gold thread. For memory, he says. Yours to keep or release. You glance around, half expecting someone to explain that this is all metaphor, that it doesn't matter, that it's just ritual. But no one says that. Because here in this quiet corner of the temple, it does matter. Hair holds your past. Hair touches the gods. Hair cut in the right place at the right time, with the right hands and the right prayer, can change something inside you. Before you leave, Ayahmes does something unexpected. He takes a single strand of your hair, one you didn't even notice fall earlier, and presses it into wet clay, sealing it into a tiny tablet. If you ever return, he says softly, this will remember you. You don't speak. You just nod, tucking the memory away like a coin under your tongue. And as you walk back through the temple gates, barefoot and blinking at the stars, the night feels bigger, wiser, like it saw what happened and is choosing to keep your secrets. The sun rises pink and sleepy over the rooftops as you meander through the narrow alleys of the workers' quarter, where life is louder, rougher, and just a bit smellier than in the temple gardens. Here the people don't care much for lunar alignments or obsidian scalp stones. They care about lice. And you, friend, are about to understand why shaving your head became the ultimate survival tactic. You step into a modest hut where the air smells strongly of vinegar ashes and what can only be described as defeat. A mother holds her son down as another woman, wiry, no-nonsense barefoot, inspects his scalp like she's expecting to find treasure or war crimes. She clicks her tongue, leans back, and mutters, "It's time." What follows is swift, unsentimental, and deeply satisfying to watch. With a bronze razor that's been sharpened to a whisper's edge, she begins to shave the boy's head. Not a trim, not a touch-up. A full, clean sweep. Strands of curly hair fall in soft clumps onto the packed earth. The boy winces. The mother winces. You wince. But the razor keeps moving. Lice weren't just a nuisance in ancient Egypt. They were a scourge. The heat, the dust, the closeness of city life all created a perfect storm for tiny, unwanted guests. For poorer Egyptians who didn't have the luxury of perfumed oils or ceremonial combings, shaving was the most reliable defense. And eventually, it became more than hygiene. It became fashion, then custom, then expectation. You run your fingers along your own scalp, suddenly itching for no reason whatsoever. The power of suggestion is strong. Nearby, a basket of tools sits beside a small coal brazier. There's a set of tweezers, a comb carved from ivory, and a strange little scoop that you realize far too late is for scraping nits from the skin. A girl about 12 years old sits patiently while her grandmother does just that. Her expression, absolute serenity. Clearly, this is not her first infestation. The older woman dips the scoop into a bowl of vinegar and date pulp. They hate the acid, she explains. Makes them run for the ears. That's where we trap them. You involuntarily clutch your ears. Some archaeologists believe NIT combs were among the earliest grooming tools used regularly in Egyptian households. They've been found in tombs, homes, and even tucked into the wrappings of mummies, possibly as a symbolic gesture, or perhaps because nobody wants to be itchy in the afterlife. Historians still debate whether full head shaving was practiced widely across all classes, or whether it was more typical of servants, laborers, and priests. What's clear is that the higher up the social ladder you climbed, the more options you had: wigs, oils, scented lice repellents. But even the elite were not immune to the crawl of tiny parasites. Queen Tiye, the formidable wife of Amenhotep III, was famously buried with a comb beside her wig, just in case. You sit down beside the boy, now bald and blinking. The air around him already feels cleaner. His scalp gleams under the sun like a polished stone. He looks strangely proud. There's a theory, one of those fringe but not too fringe ideas, that some communities believed shaving the head cleared not only lice, but bad thoughts. The idea being, if hair could store memories or attract demons as other customs suggested, then removing it was like deleting your browser history. A fresh slate, a lighter load. The practical benefits are obvious. Shaved heads stay cooler. Less risk of infection. Easier to clean. And when paired with linen head wraps, they made for a kind of mobile microclimate. And let's be honest, bald heads look kind of majestic under the Egyptian sun, like you're born ready to be carved into a temple wall. Later, you're offered a vinegar rinse. You hesitate. The woman tells you it'll clean your thoughts. You nod politely and duck your head. The vinegar stings a lot. And yet, when you walk back outside, scalp tingling and eyes watering slightly, you feel something shift. Like a fog has cleared, or at least been mildly scrubbed away with fermented fruit juice. A group of children runs by, 3 of them, bald, one still clinging to a wild mop of curls. You hear the word knit bag thrown with glee. There's laughter. A chase, a sense that hair here isn't precious, it's tactical, it's survival. It's just one more thing you manage, like sunburn and sand in your sandals. As you return to the salon district, passing women with shaved temples and men with clean domes hidden beneath linen wraps, it dawns on you that in this world, baldness wasn't lack. It was clarity. You scratch your head, then stop, just in case. You're wandering a residential alley as dusk wraps the city in soft purples and golds, your freshly vinegar-rinsed scalp catching the breeze like a well-oiled solar panel. You think you're done for the day. Maybe a nap. Maybe a return visit to Tia for a calming oil dab. But then you hear laughter, soft, conspiratorial, and very much up to no good. You peek around the corner and find 2 young women in the middle of an impromptu sucellum. One's braiding the other's hair, but not just any braid. It's elaborate, tied with ribbon, and at the end of the plait, a small knotted cord tucked in with deliberate secrecy. They spot you. Pause. Then laugh again, this time louder. It's a love braid, one whispers, beckoning you over. You sit, because at this point, why wouldn't you? Turns out in ancient Egypt, hair wasn't just for rituals or lice evasion. It was for secrets, hidden messages, emotional grenades tied with string. A love knot might be slipped into someone's braid when they weren't looking. Or bolder still, woven into your own hair and worn until the target noticed. The knot's position, color, and tightness all meant something. Too loose. You're not serious, tied close to the scalp. Deep feelings, near the end. You're teasing fate. This is emotional espionage via strands of hair. Your new hosts are sisters, though one is suspiciously better at braiding than the other. They show you how to thread intentions into hair. One plait is for longing, another is to ward off a rival. A double braid over the left ear. A coded signal that you're interested, but only after the harvest. There's a satirical piece from ancient Egyptian literature, essentially an old-timey comedy skit that jokes about a man trying to decode his girlfriend's hairstyle. He mistakes a mourning braid for a marriage proposal. Chaos ensues. Scholars love it. Ancient couples probably did too. You lean forward and let them try a simple knot on you. Nothing too scandalous, just a travel safely charm. They work quickly, laughing as they debate whether your hair is more nobleman or stray goat. You accept your fate. Braids secured, they show you a tiny mirror, a polished disc with a carved handle shaped like Hathor's face. Your braid gleams in the twilight, and there, tied with red dyed thread, is your new passenger, a little knot holding someone else's intention. Maybe your own. Hair, in Egypt, often doubled as a personal scroll, a thing you wrote messages on, with twists and coils instead of ink. Some lovers exchanged braids like tokens. Others left pieces of hair at temple altars, whispering their beloved's name as an offering. If you were brave or foolish, you might even send your braid as a gift tied in a linen pouch. Romantic, sure. Risky, absolutely. If rejected, it might be burned. Historians still argue whether these love braiding customs were widespread or mostly literary invention. But the archaeological evidence includes tiny rings, beads, and charms found tangled in wigs and hair remains, suggesting some version of these rituals had a foot in real life. The older sister leans in, suddenly serious. You know, she says, some people believe if you dream of someone while your hair is braided with theirs, you'll meet in the field of reeds. That's the Egyptian paradise, if you're wondering. Basically, heaven, but with perfect crops and no taxes. You laugh nervously, but she doesn't. I'm serious. It's why some people only cut their hair after heartbreak, so they don't carry the dream anymore. A silence hangs in the alley, soft and reverent. Then the younger sister yells at a passing boy, accusing him of stealing ribbon. The moment breaks, the air resets, and everything is silly again. Before you leave, they give you a thin band of papyrus pressed with a pattern. It's a safe braid guide, basically a recipe card for intentions. You roll it up and tuck it behind your ear. As you wander back through torchlit streets, you catch glimpses of braids everywhere. Some tiny, discreet, others long and curling like river reeds. You wonder how many of them are messages, warnings, invitations. You touch your own braid, just one knot. But now that you know what to look for, it feels like it buzzes with quiet electricity. You pass a couple, sitting on a stone bench. She's gently combing his hair. He's asleep, or pretending to be. Either way, there's a calm there that feels ancient, sacred. In this world, hair isn't just an accessory. It's a language, one that whispers even when you don't. Tonight, the moon is just a sliver, barely peeking out from behind the palm fronds as you find yourself ushered somewhat ceremoniously into a wide stone chamber, lit by flickering oil lamps. A cool breeze snakes through latticework windows, and everything smells faintly of beeswax and blue lotus. You're here for a royal fitting, and not just any fitting, a pharaonic wig experience. Yes, apparently even common wanderers like you are allowed one night of splendor, provided you behave and don't sweat too much on the gold embroidery. Your guide is Dedi, a court stylist with a voice as smooth as oiled linen, and the fashion sense of someone who routinely tells nobility how to pose in their own tomb art. He eyes you critically, then claps once. Let's make you look like you could at least attend a royal banquet, he says. What follows is a process as complex as a coronation. First comes scalp prep. a clay mask made with crushed fig leaves, goose fat, and carabash. To calm the thoughts, Dedi explains, and remove peasant dust. You thank him. You think. Then the fitting begins. The wig is brought in by two assistants carrying it with the kind of reverence most people reserve for religious relics. And honestly, that's not far off. This isn't just hair. It's a statement, an entire identity perched upon your scalp. Royal wigs were often massive tiered constructions of human hair, dyed plant fibers, beeswax, and animal glue. Some were curled and stacked like layer cakes. Others draped in long, even strands, like a waterfall of midnight. In the accessories, gold wire, beaded netting, scent cones, tiny deity charms. You half expect it to hum with power when they place it on your head. It doesn't hum, but it does tilt slightly left. Dedi huffs. The wig is adjusted powdered and scented with a blend Dedi refers to as the Pharaoh's Sunday blend. You ask what's in it. He just smiles. A secret known only to kings and me. There's a mirror polished silver, not bronze, and when you catch your reflection, you barely recognize yourself. The wig casts shadows down your neck. It elongates your posture. You sit straighter. You blink slower. You feel important, dangerous even. In royal circles, wigs were more than fashion. They were symbolic armor. A queen's wig might feature serpentine braids to evoke Wadjet the cobra goddess. A high priest's wig could resemble a hawk's wings when viewed from above, calling on Horus for protection. Some wigs had compartments woven discreetly into them, hidden pockets for charms, love notes, or in one legend, poisoned pins. Historians still debate whether these accounts are factual or more poetic metaphor, but the idea that a royal's hairpiece could double as a lethal weapon, deliciously Egyptian. You're shown illustrations from tomb walls. Amenhotep's wig, curling in impossible spirals, Nefertiti's high-arched coiffure echoing the lotus bloom. These weren't just hairstyles, they were messages in silhouette. A pharaoh could declare power just by turning their head, but these wigs weren't worn all day. Most nobles shaved their heads beneath to stay cool and clean. The wig was for performance. It came on with the jewelry and the perfumed oils, often just for temple visits or public appearances. Think ancient red carpet. Dedi starts adjusting the curls around your temples. Now, you look like someone who gives decrees, he says, stepping back with approval. Then adds, slightly ridiculous ones, but still, you're offered a linen cloak, just to complete the illusion. For drama, they explain. And now swathed in luxury, smelling like a divine pastry, and feeling heavier by several pounds of status hair, you're led to a small dais for your audience with the mirror. There's no audience, of course, just you. But standing there staring at your bewigged reflection, something shifts. You see how these wigs weren't just accessories, they were tools. Costumes. Masks. You could become someone with the right hair. Someone bold. Someone revered or feared. There's a theory, less fringe, more whispered, that some pharaohs had multiple wigs for different personalities. The benevolent one, the judge, the god embodied. Some even say Ramses II wore a different wig for battle than he did for diplomacy, each tailored to provoke specific psychological effects. Whether that's true or royal propaganda, well, the Egyptians were masters of both. Before you remove the wig, Dedi presses a charm into your hand. It's tiny gold foil wrapped around a single curled hair. Pharaohs gave them to favorites, he says, for protection, or to remember whose court you were part of. You nod, slip it into your satchel, and gently let them lift the wig from your head. You're bald again, sweaty, a bit itchy, but somehow you feel taller. As you step back into the night air, the stars seem to bow, just slightly. Or maybe that's just your neck, recovering from holding up 3 pounds of symbolism. Still, you don't forget the weight. You remember how it changed the way you moved, and you understand, now really understand, why Egyptian hair was never just hair. The next morning, you're wandering the edge of the potter's quarter, eyes still adjusting to the golden haze of sunrise, when you hear the unmistakable sound of panic. A boy bursts from a nearby hut, arms flailing smoke curling from the edge of his tunic. Behind him, a woman is shouting something about oil and curses. You freeze, half concerned, half curious, and then a voice beside you mutters, "Ah, apprentice oilfire. Classic." You turn. It's Beck the wigmaker from earlier. He's sipping a barley drink and looks entirely unbothered by the miniature disaster unfolding before him. "Poor lad," he says. "Probably forgot to keep the palm oil away from the fire again. Happens every few moons." Today's lesson. Not all hair magic goes according to plan. The apprentice in question, a lanky teen with an impressively singed eyebrow, is dragged back into the hut. You follow, of course you do, and discover a chaotic little salon crammed with tools, dyes, and enough hair oil to lubricate an entire chariot brigade. The smell is sharp, scorched resin-charred hair and panic sweat. Palm oil, you quickly learn, is a primary ingredient in many Egyptian styling balms. It's nourishing, aromatic, and beautifully flammable. When blended with beeswax and perfumed essences, it creates a glossy sheen perfect for ceremonial curls and status ringlets. But leave it too close to an open flame, and well, you get today's hairstyle singed surprise. The woman in charge, a stern matron named Nettie, snatches the jar from the apprentice's trembling hands. "This is why we don't daydream during sacred prep," she scolds, then turns to you. "He was making a beard weave for the temple guard." You blink. Beard weave. She sighs. "Yes, not everyone can grow a proper ceremonial beard, so we help." That's right. Some men, especially those in public-facing or priestly roles, wore artificial beards, braided, oiled, and secured with leather straps. Pharaohs, too. In fact, the false beard was a symbol of divine kingship, worn even by female pharaohs like Hatshepsut. It said, "I rule, I endure." Also, check out my excellent grooming. Nettie gestures to a rack of beards hanging like sausages over the fire, well away from the oil now. There's the classic chin-length wise man model, the forked military commander style, and even a curly version she calls the Osiris Special. You try one on. It's heavier than expected, slightly itchy, and smells vaguely of cedarwood and goat. But the effect, surprisingly dignified. You look like someone who delivers proclamations and then disappears into the desert with purpose. The apprentice, now bandaged and blushing, watches you. "I was shaping the tips with beeswax," he mumbles. "Didn't know the wick was still lit." Apparently, beard shaping was both art and alchemy. The ends were often curled using heated sticks, and tiny beads of wax were added for stiffness. In theory, it gave the wearer a more divine silhouette. In practice, it also meant your face was occasionally flammable. Historians still argue whether artificial beards were worn daily or saved for special occasions. Some believe there were even day beards and ceremonial beards, depending on the length of your audience list and how close you'd be to open flames. But it wasn't just about looking majestic. Beards, real or fake, were believed to carry masculine energy, sacred authority, and a connection to Osiris, the god of the afterlife. So a carefully tended chin strap wasn't vanity, it was theology. With sideburns, Nettie shows you an old papyrus scroll with diagrams of beard-weaving patterns. Each knot style corresponds to a different blessing: courage, eloquence, fertility, not bursting into flames. You ask if that last one is a joke. She doesn't answer. The salon begins to fill with regulars men preparing for a market debate. Women requesting braided sideburns, surprisingly popular, and one man who just wants his eyebrows tinted to match his ceremonial mustache. Nettie sighs but complies. You notice a pot of thick indigo dye warming on a side table. For beard darkening, Beck explains. Also, hiding grays when making offerings to Ra. Apparently, the sun god doesn't care for salt and pepper whiskers. Suddenly, a boy bursts in with a panicked whisper. The high priest's beard fell off in the middle of a blessing. There is silence. Then chaos. Nettie grabs a fresh strap, snaps it between her hands, and mutters, "Hold still, I'll fix it with pitch." The entire room surges into action like a pit crew at a very dramatic beard race. You step back and observe the madness. Hair in flames, theology in knots, frantic combing and furious murmuring. It's absurd and deeply human. All this trouble for something most people don't even notice. But in Egypt, everything visible is spiritual. A beard is never just a beard. It's a declaration, a conduit, a persona. Before you leave, Nettie hands you a tiny beard charm wrapped in dyed thread. For when you must speak boldly, she says. You thank her, tucking it into your satchel, beside your knot braid, your pharaoh hairfoil, and whatever spell the henna girl whispered over your scalp. It's becoming quite the collection, and somehow not a single piece feels unnecessary. The sun is high again, casting long lines of light across the dusty floor of a different sort of sanctuary. Quiet, dappled with palm shadows, and thick with the scent of ink and dried herbs. You've been granted access to a place few are allowed to visit, a hairdresser's manual library. Or rather, a modest, reed-walled scriptorium where faded papyrus scrolls whisper the collected wisdom of generations of beauticians, priests, and potionaires. Tia is here, of course. Who else could guide you through this labyrinth of beauty and ritual? She waves you in with ink-stained fingers, beaming with the barely contained pride of someone who has just uncovered a secret recipe and can't wait to share. Today, she says, we study the great papyrus of scalp matters. It sounds more impressive in Egyptian, probably. She unrolls the first scroll with care. The reed fibers crackle softly, and the ink, still remarkably legible after what must be centuries, dances in neat vertical columns. Each section is devoted to a different hair concern: dullness, brittleness, balding, spiritual fog, bad dreams, romantic blockage. Yes, apparently, even matters of the heart were addressed with a good head oiling. The recipes are as varied as they are bizarre. One formula combines donkey milk, mashed leeks, and ground turquoise. Another requires 7 crushed beetles, a spoon of goose grease, and a prayer to Hathor whispered over an open flame. You wonder who had time for all this, and then remember, This was medicine therapy and religion rolled into one. There's even an entire scroll dedicated to lunar alignment hair care. You read trim on the waning moon for rest. Braid on the waxing moon for courage. Never wash when Sirius rises unless joy is unwanted. That last one is underlined 3 times. Noted. Tia points out margin notes, scrawled comments from past readers. Smells awful works well. Only try this if desperate. Beware this one attracts cats. Historical Yelp reviews, basically. One passage catches your eye. A paste of crushed lentils, river mud, and cedar sap when applied to the scalp of a child before sleep will summon truthful dreams. You ask if that was meant metaphorically. Tia raises an eyebrow. Everything is literal and metaphorical here. You're starting to see that now. There's a myth referenced throughout the scrolls about a hair goddess named Renutu, now mostly forgotten, who was said to weave fate into the curls of newborns. She braided futures, detangled sorrows, and clipped misfortune with scissors made of starlight. Her temples are gone, but in these scrolls her wisdom lingers. Some scholars dismiss these manuals as folk science, a mixture of superstition and pre-modern guesswork. Others point to their surprising accuracy. Castor oil does encourage hair growth. Henna is antimicrobial. The rituals, for all their eccentricity, built habits of care, observation, and gentleness. That's not nothing. One scroll includes a section called "Do Not Do These Things" with hair. It's a list of taboos. Do not braid your hair while cursing someone, or the anger will bind to your roots. Do not cut hair in silence. Let a song be present, even if it's bad. Do not share your comb with someone who sleeps near tombs. Do not bury hair near a fig tree unless you wish to dream of someone who has left. You read each one slowly, unsure whether to laugh or shiver. And then your favorite discovery yet. A salon script. An actual written guide for apprentice hairdressers on how to speak to clients during treatments. It includes phrases like, "Your thoughts are tangled. Let's soothe them. This oil remembers the last full moon. You are not heavy, only full of memory. We cut not the hair, but the weight." Tia smiles as you read them aloud. "We still use some of those," she says. "It helps people leave a little lighter." You ask if she ever writes her own scrolls. She nods, retrieves a fresh papyrus, and shows you her own additions. Simple remedies, poetic notes, and tiny drawings of scalp pressure points shaped like constellations. "Someone will read this someday," she says, "and wonder if I was wise or ridiculous." You don't wonder, you know. Before you leave, she offers you a small scroll wrapped in twine. "For your travels," she says. There's a recipe inside for a calming rinse, a knot to remember home, and one dream suggestion. You raise an eyebrow. "What kind of dream?" She just smiles. "You'll find out when you wake up." You step back into the brightness of the street, scroll in hand, head full of ancient advice, and heart a little softer. Somewhere behind you, the papyrus rustles in the breeze, like whispered threads of wisdom still being woven. Hair isn't just history, it's a record, a memory, a map of how we soothed each other before we had anything else. You've returned to the riverbank, just as the sky softens into evening, and the sound of distant temple bells mingles with the lapping of the Nile. It's washing day, not for laundry, but for heads. A long row of people sits on the sun-warmed stones, legs tucked backs, straight necks, tilted forward. Women hum as they work pouring warm water from terracotta jars massaging herbal rinses into scalps and gently combing away the week's dust and worry. You're ushered in by a grandmotherly figure with forearms like granite and a smile like honey. She pats the stone beside her and points to your scalp. Time to clean your thoughts. You sit. What follows is less like bathing and more like baptism. First, she douses your head with warm river water, scented faintly with mint and lemongrass. It runs down your neck, over your shoulders, and into the thirsty earth. Then comes the scrub-crushed lotus root mixed with ash, a touch of clay, and something resinous and sharp. It smells like honesty and wood smoke. As she works the paste into your scalp, her thumbs press just the right places. The muscles in your neck release. You exhale without realizing you've been holding your breath. The weekly hair wash was more than hygiene in ancient Egypt. It was ritual reset, a sensory checkpoint between work and rest market and home chaos and calm. And it wasn't just a solo affair. Washing together forged quiet bonds between mother and daughter, teacher and pupil, friend and stranger. Some groups washed only under moonlight. Others gathered at sunrise. Here, it's tied to the sound of bells from a nearby temple, said to loosen the mind's knots before the water does. The woman scrubbing you now hums a tune as old as sand. She says her grandmother used to hum it while rinsing her own mother's hair. We sing so your thoughts know where to go, she explains. If they hear nothing, they wander. You glance to your left and see a small child sitting motionless as her father gently braids her wet curls. He's clumsy, but she doesn't seem to mind. The air is thick with jasmine and memory. Once rinsed, your hair is gently towel dried with soft linen. Then comes the final rinse, a diluted infusion of rosemary calendula and what might be crushed pomegranate peel. For brightness, she says, on the outside and in. You ask if these washes are always done like this. She nods. Some do it weekly. Some only before big decisions. Some after heartache. She shrugs. Hair carries things. You don't always know what until it's time to let them go. She gestures behind her. A row of small offering jars stands in the sand, each one containing water from a wash. Some are cloudy, others tinted red or greenish depending on the herbs used. People leave them at temples, hoping their rinsed worries will be carried off by the gods, or at the very least by the river. Historians still argue whether these cleansing rituals were religious, purely medicinal, or symbolic gestures passed down like lullabies. But when you're here, damp, drowsy, freshly scrubbed, it doesn't matter. What matters is how light your skull feels. You reach into your satchel and touch the papyrus scroll from the library, the charm from the beard salon, the braid from the sisters, all souvenirs of this strange tactile journey, each one soaked in oil ritual and something deeper attention. You ask the woman what happens if someone never washes. She pauses. They forget. Eventually, they forget who they are under the dust. You shiver a little, not from cold, but from how true that feels. As she wraps a soft linen scarf around your damp head, you realize this isn't just to dry it. It's to preserve the stillness. Let the water do its work, she whispers. And then you're done. You walk back through the village, under the soft glow of evening lamps, wrapped in linen, quiet as a shadow head, fragrant and light. Every scent catches the breeze differently now. Every sound seems distant and slow. You feel more like yourself, or maybe more like someone you were always meant to be. And as you step across the threshold into sleep's waiting arms, you understand, sometimes, the only way to cleanse your soul is to wash your hair. The night is quiet, the streets hushed like a held breath, and you're being led once again down a narrow corridor lit by nothing but the occasional oil lamp. The walls here are smooth and cool, carved with faded inscriptions. You're deep within a house, not a temple, not a salon, but a home. And tonight you meet someone different. She introduces herself simply as Setapenmut, not a priestess, not a stylist, just a woman. But once she begins to speak, you understand why people call her the Matron of Hair, a title spoken with quiet reverence by nearly everyone you've met. She's old, but not frail. Her movements are deliberate. Her voice rich and grainy, like carved cedar. Her home smells like dried rose petals and well-kept memories. She doesn't offer a chair. She gestures to the floor. You sit. I've dressed the hair of midwives, scribes, thieves, nobles, dancers, and one man who thought he was the reincarnation of a falcon, she says. They all needed the same thing. You tilt your head. Comfort, she says, and someone to see them. Her hands are already in your hair. She doesn't ask. She simply begins to braid. Not tightly. This isn't about fashion. This is something slower, older. The braid is wide and flat, made with the same care you'd use weaving a mat for a sleeping child. As she works, she tells you things. That every village used to have someone like her. That hairdressers weren't just workers. They were keepers of secrets and lineages and the rhythms of healing. In a world where few had privacy and fewer had time, the person who touched your scalp was also the person who learned who you were when you let go. She recounts a story, soft and strange, about a young widow who came to her once mute with grief, unable to speak. Setapenmut combed her hair every day for 13 days. No oil, no braid, just the sound of wooden teeth and gentle hands. On the 14th day, the woman said 3 words. He liked curls. That was enough. Hair remembers, Setapenmut says, gently smoothing a ribbon into the braid she's building. More than people do. You think of all you've carried on your head. Worry, questions, names you forgot to say aloud. The day you sat in silence, the day you laughed too hard, the nights you couldn't sleep. It's all there, somewhere between the follicles woven tight. Setapenmut speaks of rituals you've never heard. Morning plats dyed with wine. Forgiveness, knots tied by both parties at once. Braids for the lost, meant to guide spirits back to the body during illness. Some of these traditions have faded. Others have changed shape. But in quiet houses like this, the memory lingers. She pauses, looks you over, then says, "You came with many strands." Now they move together. You don't quite know what she means, but you feel it. Historians still debate the societal role of Egyptian hairdressers. Were they purely functional? Were they spiritual? Were they women of influence or simply skilled hands? The truth, as you've seen, is both messier and more beautiful, because the act of caring for someone's hair is never just about hair. It's about witnessing, restoring, offering presence in a world too often tangled. Setapenmut finishes the braid and tucks the end into itself like the final line of a scroll. There, she says, "Now your thoughts will lie flat while you sleep." You thank her. She says nothing in return, just nods. You stand. The house creaks gently as the wind presses through. Outside, the stars blink like slow ideas forming. Before you go, she places something in your hand. A small comb carved from ebony, worn smooth by generations of use. It belonged to my mother's teacher, she says. Pass it on when someone needs it. And then you're outside again, braided, held, changed. You don't know if you'll ever return to this version of ancient Egypt. But a part of it, its warmth, its rhythm, its sacred quiet wisdom will leave with you. Not in your bag, not in a scroll, but in your hair,